Wolf. January 1980. It was late, gone 1 in the morning. Snowflakes drifted on the breeze. Carolyn glanced in the Mini's rearview mirror. Gwen lay on the back seat amid a heap of blankets. 7 years old, but still her baby. They were safe now. Movement ahead dragged Carolyn's gaze back to the road. Something ragged and black tore out from beneath the trees. Gwen awoke with a jolt. "It's all right, love," Carolyn reassured, her involuntary cry still ringing in the air. "A fox. It ran out and gave me a turn, that's all." Heart thumping, she swerved around a final bend. Out of the wilderness, Lowe Hall loomed into view. The landlord drew back the bolts, a dressing gown wrapped hastily about him. "Les?" A woman and child stood outside. "Aye," he answered, puzzled and half asleep. Something nudged against the child's hand and she squealed. An aged border collie, once black fur, dusted grey, regarded her quizzically. "Jessie, there you are, get in!" The dog slunk between her master's legs, disappearing into the pub. "I'm really sorry to wake you up. I'm Carolyn Ashton. We spoke on the phone." "Aye." Les scratched white stubble and frowned, thinking, "Her that's bought the old farm. Wasn't expecting thee till next month. I haven't even begun to sort them rooms upstairs." "I'm really sorry. I had to get away sooner, and then the drive took a lot longer than I thought." "Aye, we're a ways away from anywhere here in Greenwood." The landlord frowned again, and his gaze drifted off over Carolyn's shoulder, eyes searching. "Well then," he stepped back, pulling a door wide as he did so. "I'd better come in before thou catches the death." The scream shredded Carolyn's dream of escape. The nest of blankets on the bare boards lay empty. Gwen was across the creaking landing. The girl flew to her arms. Les thudded up the stairs, Jessie woofing after him. The room was piled high with old furniture, smelling of damp and burnt wood. The head hung crookedly opposite the doorway. Yellowed bone beneath charred, scabrous fur, muzzle frozen in a disfigured snarl. In the snug, Gwen ate porridge the landlord had cooked up. He and Carolyn swigging tea as Jessie settled with a sigh. "Now then," Les began. "Old Lord Lowe had this place built long, long ago. That daft head, well, I say it belonged to the last wild wolf killed. True or not, it hung here for a long while. Then there was a big fire 100 years or so back, and everything hereabouts burned. Everything but that manky head. Made him a right ugly bugger, mine, but not to be afeard of, really." The landlord grinned, rapping on the table. Jessie's ears pricked up with a whine. "Too big for a wolf," said Gwen, blowing on her porridge. "Looks more like a bear." "More like a bloody dog's dinner, if you ask me," laughed the landlord. The little family laughed along with him. Lowe Farm's keys had been left with Les. Padlocks secured the gates to its fenced-off farmland. A tangle of bushes and brambles 10 feet high strained at the rusted railings opposite Lowe Hall. The new start Carolyn had pinned everything on, hidden somewhere beyond. She and Gwen would stay at the pub while she worked on the little cottage. A few months maybe. Then they'd move in and live happily ever after. Within a week, it became obvious that, armed with only a rusted billhook and a battered spade, Carolyn was getting nowhere. Ted Berry was a groundskeeper and one of Lowe Hall's regulars. Les had a word with him about helping out. He'd sought him a few pints for his trouble. The going was rough, even with Ted's petrol strimmer, his ragged paths snaking around half a dozen overgrown obstacles. One was an ornate aviary, its floor littered with bones. From when this was the Lord's menagerie, Ted nodded, lighting his pipe. Jessie and Gwen had come investigating, and the duo nosed at the narrow bars. "The Lord who built the hall?" Gwen asked, poking at a parrot's skull. No, the one they say haunts..." Ted paused, recollecting his audience, who lived here in Victorian times. "Mad for zoos, the Victorians. Your ma and dad ever take you to the zoo?" Gwen's face fell. She set off at a run, Jessie panting after her. "We don't talk about him," she called back, disappearing into unstrimmed wilderness. The cottage had been built during King James's reign. Everything but its stone walls turned to ash a century before Carolyn set foot inside. What remained was cloaked in ivy, a forgotten, ancient ruin. It was Carolyn's turn to cry. Les wrapped an arm around her. "What's to do, lass?" It all came out. She was an idiot. She'd spent everything on a daydream she had no way of making real. She barely even had enough left to pay him another week's rent. "Well now, I've been thinking. I could do with a hand behind the bar. Weekly wage, accommodation thrown in free for as long as it takes to get this place sorted. No rush." Carolyn hugged the barrel of a landlord tight, sobbing with relief and gratitude. They found it in the vegetable patch, a square of land next to the cottage cleared for Gwen to play in. Carolyn was behind the bar when she heard the cry. It was buried in a shallow grave, wrappings stained red with fresh blood. Jessie had done the digging. Once she'd caught the scent, there'd been no stopping her. Grey flesh still clung to the dinner plate-sized paw she gnawed furiously at. The stench was sickening. Gwen sat dazed amid crushed nettles, nursing her bitten hand. "It's not Jessie's fault," she protested. "It's something from the old zoo. I didn't want her to get sick." Les made a grab for the dog and she turned in fury, teeth bared, hackles up. The phone rang and rang as men grumbled over pints of mild. Taking matters in hand at last, a patron leaned across the bar to lift the receiver. "I'm after Carolyn Ashton." "Ring back later, lad. She's busy." Click. It was late, gone 1 in the morning. Gwen slept in her mother's arms. Leslie's snores drifted upstairs. Jessie, banished from her usual bed, awoke in the snug. Something moved behind the frosted glass. The dog flew to meet the intruder. The snug's heavy door slammed against her side, pinning her. The howl sent the landlord rolling out of bed. "Jessie!" Snarls, shouts, shattering glass. Les met them in the bar. Tackling with all his weight, he dragged them to the ground. "Carolyn, get out! Get Gwen!" Long fingers clawed at Leslie's face, a blackened thumbnail digging into one eye. "Bastard!" Carolyn thundered down the stairs, Gwen in her arms clinging. "Les! What?" The words died on her lips as she saw them grappling amid drifting mist and glittering glass. The figure, which wasn't Les, lifted its shaggy, bearded face towards her, bloody teeth bared. He'd found them. Carolyn dragged back the bolts on the pub's doors, mist pouring in like smoke. Gwen in her arms, she ran. Outside, Jessie lay bloody, unmoving, surrounded by shattered window glass. Get to the car. The Mini appeared out of the fog, bonnet open, battery on the gravel leaking acid. A pained cry echoed out from the pub. Get to the farm. Carolyn ran. She dropped Gwen amidst the mid-soaked weeds. Run and hide, baby! Carolyn! The sound of him calling her name turned her blood to ice. A nightmare worse than any she'd dreamt since they left. Since she left him. She ran. She hid. Carolyn! Carolyn crouched inside the roofless cottage, waiting, listening. Something shifted outside. She held her breath, tightened her grip. A dragging, loose earth falling. Graveyard stink billowed in on the mist, filling the space. A rotten, carnivore stench. Running, crashing through the undergrowth towards the cottage, panting, towards her, towards it. A cry of shock and fear and anger. A tangle of bodies tumbled into the cottage. Les must have... But it wasn't Les. They fought like beasts. Claws flashed red in mist-muted moonlight as they tore at each other. No telling where one ended and the other began. A writhing ball of rage. Filthy nails sank deep into Carolyn's bare ankle. She struck out with the billhook she'd been gripping all along, the one Ted had sharpened for her. Terrified, she battered at the twisting bodies. The blade caught. She wrenched it back, brought it down again and again, hot blood spattering her nightdress and ancient ivied walls. Again and again. Snarls became screeching whines. Again and again. And again, until, at last, the whines died away into oblivion. Les's eye was gone, useless. Still, he had another. Besides, he reckoned the patch made him look like a pirate. His broken leg would heal in time. They buried Jessie in the vegetable patch. She was a hero. She'd saved their lives. Carolyn mustn't blame herself. People kept telling her that. Les, police, nurses. He was a thug with a history of burglary, assault, and more. More than only she knew. What woman wouldn't want to get away, as far as possible? It wasn't Carolyn's fault he came after them. None of it was her fault. And thank God, they whispered, he didn't get a chance to use that billhook on anything but a dog. A dog which, according to them, had torn out his throat. Carolyn had Ted burn the thing from the vegetable patch grave. No one but her seeing or acknowledging the blade marks all over its rotten body. It was headless, searching blind out there in the mist. He must have stumbled over it. That was what they said. He'd fallen, and Jessie had seized her chance. Then, somehow, she'd crawled back to the pub. This time, the head burned. The thing which had hung in Lowe Hall for who knows how long. Carolyn cast it into the flames herself, watched it eaten up, all the way, into snowflake ashes, which drifted away on the winter wind.